family on vacation, snapping photos at a national park, stumbles across the dead body of a middle-aged woman. Meanwhile, another woman 15 miles away is reported missing and an investigation begins. Are the two cases connected, or is there something more sinister going on in the Rocky Mountain State? My name is M. William Phelps. I'm an investigative journalist and the true crime author of close to 50 books. I've dedicated the past 20 years of my life to helping families of the missing and murdered. Join me. We're crossing the line. The Colorado National Monument is one of the most spectacular landscapes of the American West. The canyon alone will stop you in your tracks and take your breath away, not to mention the towering monoliths. Bighorn sheep and eagles flying in the breeze paint the background of your view. On Tuesday, July 2nd, 2013, a group of out-of-state travelers decide to make a pit stop by the monument for a photo op, being sure to get the park sign in the picture. We've all been there. We've all done this. The group parks, gets out of their vehicle, and are immediately in awe of their surroundings. It's close to 12:45 p.m. As they are walking around the east side of the entrance, just south of Highway 340, there along the embankment, 15 feet off the main road, one of them sees what they describe to 911 dispatch as a lifeless adult body, a woman close to middle age, and she appears to be dead. On the same day, earlier that morning, close to 8 a.m., a Mesa County Sheriff's deputy is called out to North Avenue in Grand Junction, Colorado, which is about 15 miles from the National Monument. 45-year-old David Norman says he is concerned about his live-in girlfriend, Kathy Fortner, who had just turned 49 the previous month. A mother of two daughters, Kathy grew up in Greenville, Mississippi, and had relocated to Colorado in November 2012, the previous year. The deputy asks David, "What's going on?" "We had an argument," he says. "She took off like 10:30 last night and left without her purse or any money or her ID. She took her cell phone, but I have not heard from her since." He sounds worried. "She would often do this," David explains, "but it's unlike her to be gone so long." The deputy takes the report from David, tells him they'll be in touch, and heads back to the sheriff's office. I mention this a lot on the show, that good cops rely on instinct, gut feelings. And you cannot develop those without years on the job and talking to a lot of people, getting a feel for how people respond to what is going on in their lives. The deputy has a chat with his sergeant when he returns to the office, mentioning how something just seems off in the case. It doesn't have the same feel as a routine missing adult case, whereby in a day or so, the adult cools off, returns, the couple makes up, and everything is copacetic once again. People fight, they have blow-ups, they take some time alone and make amends. The natural ebb and flow of some relationships. The Mesa County Sheriff's Office send a pair of investigators out to speak with the concerned live-in boyfriend, David. See if they can get any other information out of the guy. Did he suspect Kathy had someone else in her life? Number one question. Was she hanging out with new people? Where did she like to go blow off steam? If they can get an idea where she hung out and with whom, perhaps they can figure this thing out and maybe even grab some CCTV footage to see where it leads. I've been trying to text and call her all night and this morning, David tells the investigators. She's not responding. David hands the investigators his phone, and they sit and scroll through all his calls and texts. They take the phone and carefully study the dates and times of all the calls and texts. "Where do you work?" they asked David. "With my boss. I was with him yesterday until early afternoon. I went home, picked Kathy up, and we went for a drive, stopped and had a few beers." "How many beers?" "We didn't get drunk," he says quickly. "We came home, watched TV, then Kathy went upstairs by herself. When she came back downstairs, I was on my phone." "So when did the argument begin?" "She came down the stairs and saw that I was on my phone. I am always on my phone. And she got pissed." "You're on the phone all the time," David says Kathy yelled at him. Then she says, "Fuck this, I am walking." That's when, all of a sudden, she grabbed her cigarettes, lighter, her phone, her keys, and went out the door. She does this when she gets mad at me, and usually just walks around and comes back about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe a half hour later. David seems perplexed. Kathy being gone this long is just so unlike her. "Okay," the investigators say, "back up a little bit." They then ask David to talk them through the previous night and into that next morning. He explains they went to bed together. Everything was fine. I get up at 4:30 every morning. She generally gets up right after. She grabbed a cup of coffee and we sat together. About 8 a.m., I dropped her off at the laundromat and then I went to work. "Did you hear from her at all that day?" "No," he says, "but she usually never calls me at work." David explains further, that was when, at noon, he got out of work, picked her up, and they went out driving before stopping for those beers. As an afterthought, he then mentions that he went to Walmart early in the morning, which is easy enough to check from Walmart security cameras. David gets up and searches around a bit and comes up with a receipt. Here, he says, handing it to the investigators. He bought hot dogs, laundry detergent, bleach, and several other miscellaneous household items. They then get into a discussion about Kathy not being responsible for her own finances or her well-being. David says Social Security deemed her not responsible, so he had become her custodian. The argument was generated by Kathy flipping out because David was surfing websites on his phone, he says. He mentions Craigslist and how he is trying to sell a couch. Does she ever get violent when she gets mad, they ask him. No. Just ornery. You think she was drunk enough when she walked out to get lost? No way. We bought a 20-pack. Kathy had maybe 7 or 8 beers over 5 hours. The investigators seemed to have enough to open up a missing person report. David came across a bit guarded and nervous, but also seems to have a solid recollection of things. As the investigators are leaving, however, David says this. Kathy does take medication for seizures, and she didn't bring it with her. If she doesn't take her medication for a few days, she will have a seizure. She had one that day that lasted about 15 minutes. When was that, they want to know. Soon as I got home from work, just before we left for that drive. She was making these groaning noises and she kicked the table, and then, he says, she bit the shit out of her tongue. The investigators thank David. Walking out, they have a little chat out of David's earshot. "You smell that?" one investigator says to the other. "I did." The heavy chemical scent of bleach inside David's house. What's more, both investigators noticed that when they had a look at David's phone, the times of the texts and calls he says he made to Kathy searching for her didn't add up to the actual times on his phone. Who in the hell makes that mistake? David drives a 1984 Ford pickup truck. It's parked in the driveway. The investigators walk over and have a look around the vehicle. In the bed, one of the investigators points. "Look at that. Blood, maybe?" And here, pointing to the bumper, additional blood spatter. They decide to conduct a presumptive test on the scene. Turns out positive for blood. Either somebody is framing David for the disappearance of his girlfriend, or he has left breadcrumbs leading these investigators toward a crime. Inside their vehicle now, they call it in. They want David's truck. Waiting for a tow truck, David steps out of the house as a vehicle pulls up. It's a friend of his. David gets into the vehicle, and he and his friend take off. By now, the sheriff's department is aware that a dead woman has been found at the National Monument, and she fits a description of Kathy Fortner. After a cursory look, the coroner says that it's very likely the cause of death will be homicide, and the manner of death, blunt force trauma to the head. Let's take our first break here. Come right back. This one gets interesting. You know how much I love stupid criminals. After an autopsy, the woman is positively identified as Kathy Fortner. The coroner also says there is no doubt Kathy was murdered in a different location and dumped at the monument. Turns out the National Monument has closed-circuit video cameras all over the freaking place, and especially by the entrances and exits. Investigators focus in on the night of July 2nd and early into the morning of July 3rd. Just after midnight, a truck can be seen driving up to the area where Kathy's body was found, stopping, and then someone, a male, getting out. In clear view is the license plate number of that truck. More than that, the man in the truck looks right into one of the cameras and stares. Watching the video, one of the investigators says, "Hey, that's David. Is this guy a total dumbass? How stupid could he be to stare directly into the camera and park his truck where the plates are clearly visible?" Not 30 minutes later, they see David on video at a local car wash nearby washing his truck down. This is about 12:40 in the morning. Then the lab comes back. After comparing samples of blood found in David's truck with Kathy, they're a match, of course. Investigators then run a number from David's phone that seemed to show up a lot over those days leading up to Kathy's murder and right after. They tracked down a woman David had met on a dating app the previous month, right around Kathy's birthday. David had been texting and calling the woman as he went about killing Kathy, and dumping her body, and then trying to cover it all up by washing his truck on video and then using bleach to clean his house. David Norman has a hard look about him. Scraggly mustache, soul patch, short black hair, pronounced bags under his very dark eyes, distinctive lines in his gaunt face. He and Kathy had actually celebrated her birthday the previous month at the Colorado National Monument. In the last photo taken of Kathy, she is smiling, standing just outside one of the monument entrances, not too far from where her body is later dumped. A good friend of mine, a mentor really, criminal profiler John Kelly, who was my co-star on my investigation discovery series Dark Minds, would always tell me, the best predictor of future behavior is previous behavior. Here is David celebrating with Kathy at the National Monument, where he will later dump her body, almost as if the guy has not a brain cell in his freaking body. Driving from his house in Grand Junction to the National Monument, he had passed hundreds of areas where one could dump a body without being caught on video, and the body likely never to be found. But this idiot chooses the place where he and Kathy had celebrated her birthday with cameras pointing down at him. David Norman is, of course, picked up and arrested later that night. But they do not arrest him for the murder of his girlfriend. You see, David was on parole, having done hard time in prison for an extremely violent beating many years ago, nearly almost killing a woman. The couple David was with, when they arrest him, are then brought in and questioned. Both say David denied having anything to do with Kathy's disappearance or death. The coroner, Dr. Dean Havlick, had more to say in the days after about Kathy's autopsy, notably that Kathy's injuries were the most aggravated, serious assault injuries against a woman in terms of being beaten in the head he has ever seen. In fact, there were so many wounds to Kathy's head, there was no way the coroner could even give an exact count of how many times she had been struck in the head with whatever weapon her killer used. Which means what? Kathy's killer was full of rage, all of which had been directed at her. I think investigators knew the minute they walked into David Norman's house that Kathy's murder was not random. Random murderers, serial killers, generally do not flip a switch and turn on that boiling rage inside of them and unload like that. They get the job done and stop. Anytime you see that many injuries directed toward a woman specifically, it screams of a domestic incident with years and years of abuse, animosity, and anger behind each blow. There's no doubt for investigators that David murdered his girlfriend and dumped her body in a place that was familiar to him. He had committed a brutally violent beating of a woman in years past, as I mentioned, and had now taken things further and committed murder. And I might say, David's previous violent act against a female included him tearing hair out of her scalp after beating her unconscious and leaving head and facial injuries, all because she told him, as he was checking into a Motel 8, that his credit card had been declined. And David is 6'4" tall, close to 200 pounds. A monster of a man compared to a tiny female. Real tough guy, right? Beats up on women. David served 16 years for the motel beating. As I like to say, shitbags like David James Norman, who stalk, hit women, bully them, follow them, threaten them, etc., over time, that behavior never, ever de-escalates. It always escalates. And here we have a good example of that. Investigators head in to interview David, who is, as you know, in custody. But not for the murder. He's in custody for violating his parole. But investigators know they are going in to question one of the stupidest murderers of note we have covered here on Crossing the Line. So it's going to be interesting to see what this absolute bonehead has to say. Head over to patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps and sign up for my free content page, where I'll be interacting with you, doing live streams, posting exclusive content, sending out newsletters, and dropping a major limited series podcast exclusively for Patreon members later this year. That's patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. patreon.com/MWilliamPhelps. Let's go to our final break. Come right back. Almost half of all domestic violence-related deaths in Colorado involve women killed by a current or former male partner. Stepping out further from that and into a 30,000-foot view, on average, 20 people per minute, every 60 seconds, are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. More than 10 million per year. What's even more alarming? 1 in 3 women in the U.S. have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. I get messages and emails from people about serial killers and home invasions, and if there is a need to be concerned in this country. Not at all. Your concern and greatest threat, if you are a woman in a relationship, is sleeping right next to you. I hate to bash men, but these are the facts, the numbers. And numbers, as we all know, they don't lie. Kathy's sister, in a heartfelt emotional plea to the judge after David ended up pleading out his case, says, "Remove this poor excuse of a man from the streets." David had pled out his case down to second-degree murder, saying he didn't mean to kill Kathy, that it was an accident, which is total bullshit. In a letter to the judge, before he was sentenced, David says Kathy kicked him in the groin as they argued, and that set him off. So he pushed her. Falling, he claims, she hit her head and died. But then, bizarrely, in the same letter, he says after she was dead, he then threw rocks at her. So we are to believe that David stoned Kathy to death? None of the injuries Kathy sustained and David described line up with what the coroner found. The guy is a pathological liar. He's a coward. Remember that trip to Walmart he took to buy hot dogs and cleaning materials I mentioned, including bleach? When they checked the times, David had made that trip after killing Kathy. So he kills her. He comes back home, cooks some hot dogs, then cleans up the crime scene and dumps her body at the monument, where he is caught on CCTV video staring into the camera. The most the judge could give him was 48 years, and so he is sentenced to nearly half a century. When Judge Valerie Robeson announced the sentence, Kathy's family stood and cheered inside the courtroom. David is a career scumbag. He was busted back in 1993 as well in California for receiving stolen property, and then again in 2000 in Oklahoma for charges of carrying a firearm while on probation. When pressed, the coroner says that it is possible that David used a shovel, his fists, a baseball bat, and a large rock to beat Kathy to death. I wish I had an answer for you as to why people kill in this manner. And for some reason, they just cannot walk away when anger erupts inside them. But as I have said before, there really is no answer. I kind of like what Alfred says to Bruce Wayne in one of the Batman films. Christian Bale is Batman in this one. Batman says to Alfred, "Why are people like this?" referring to the Joker. Alfred says, "Some people just like to light the world on fire and watch it burn." And I guess that's the answer to the why question. That'll do it for this week. Thank you for coming back week after week. I am so grateful for and humbled by your continued support of this show. And thank you for sending in cases to cover. I have a lot to go through, but a majority of them you will hear on the show sooner or later. So keep sending them. And log on to crossingtheline.biz or mwilliamphelps.com to contact me and suggest cases, or just say hi. And look for me across all social media platforms using the @ symbol and my name, M. William Phelps. As always, be safe, be aware. Sources for this episode include a 14-page State of Colorado, Mesa County arrest warrant for David James Norman, February 19th, 2013. DA tacks on habitual tag in slaying case, Paul Shockley, July 31st, 2013, The Daily Sentinel. New counts filed over body near National Monument, July 30th, 2013, Associated Press. Crossing the Line is executive produced by M. William Phelps, LLC, and Matthew Valentinus, Mom's Basement Management. Written by me, M. William Phelps. Audio mastering and mixing by Matt Russell. Music by Epidemic Sound. Original music written and performed by Thomas Mooney, Tom Phelps, and Matt Russell.